strategist and Bang the Table's Boulder, Colorado office. He holds a BA in urban planning from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Through his development of a mobile community engagement app called Gymnasium, he was a speaker and finalist in the American Planning Association's Innovation Planning Apps competition in 2016. He also studied at the Danish Institute for Study Abroad in Denmark with a concentration in urban design. Jeremy is a Tampa native, and he previously was one of our interns. So please welcome Jeremy, and he'll speak after our main presenter. And speaking of interns, if you were an intern ever for this agency, raise your hand, please.
Yay!
Look at this! Working professionals that interned here. It's fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you now to Amanda Nagel. Am I saying that correctly?
You are. Excellent.
Okay, she joined Bang the Table as engagement manager after spending nearly 2 decades working on the front lines of local government, focusing on community engagement. She has served as neighborhood liaison for both the City of Boulder and the City of Fort Collins, and as the community services manager for the Estes Park Police Department. She holds a BA in psychology from the University of Alabama and an MBA in organizational leadership from Colorado State University. Amanda has a background in facilitation, conflict resolution, program and project development, and process improvement. She is motivated to use her training and teaching skills to help cities across the United States effectively connect their communities through public engagement. So please welcome.
Sorry, I'll shorten that in the future. It's really nice to be here. I haven't been in the Tampa area in, gosh, about 15 years. Wow. I'm an Alabama native, so it's really been fantastic the last 3 days. I rented a Jeep and took the top off, and everybody complains about traffic. I loved it. I'm just sitting on the bridge, enjoying the ocean on either side. I didn't care. So it's been a fantastic few days. Thanks for having me. We're going to start with a little bit of fun. So hopefully you can see the Flintstones here. I'm going to read it out for, not to insult your intelligence, but for the benefit of the video. So here we go, a little bit of Flintstones activity. Here's the scenario. Mr. Slate is planning an expansion of the gravel pit. Community members are concerned about the moving of earth and mixing of layers underneath. It could lead to catastrophic consequences. Previous attempts to dig under the Earth's surface led to the discovery of strange liquids, dark and thick. Others contend human existence depends on the ability to move stone and use it to build structures and make tools. Mr. Slate must be supported. To offset the impacts the expansion will have on neighborhoods in Bedrock, Slate has agreed to provide resources that will complete a missing link in the city's transportation infrastructure. An alternative path around the center of Bedrock, the Brontosaurus Bypass, named for the large dino wagons that will be able to utilize this oversized path. Some believe the new dino cargo wagon will access will attract new business to Bedrock, including a dino wagon manufacturing plant that will bring jobs and more humans to Bedrock. The Water Buffalo Lodge, dating back to the Ice Age, lies directly in the center of the proposed bypass corridor. So your job is to take we'll give you about 2 minutes, this isn't really rocket science, and I want you to think about your job is to create an absolute failure of community engagement process for this project. Just take a minute, let your mind wander through. What would you do to be sure that no one was happy with this process? How would you destroy community engagement in Bedrock, assuring that this project fails and that many after it also fail? So give it a little thought.
And if you guys need something to write on, I do have a few extra copies, and if I also can pass around the 10 Commandments and online engagement with minors, just let me know and I can pass them out.
Yeah, if you want to just jot down a couple ideas on the back of your 10 Commandments, that'd be great. We'll do a little bit of popcorn around the room and get some ideas out on the table.
Everybody has a sheet.
All right, so who's a quick thinker? Start shouting out some ideas. Anybody got one? How are you going to ruin it?
Don't tell anybody.
Don't tell anybody.
Start construction.
What was the other?
Start the construction.
Stop the construction.
No, start.
Start the construction. Love it. Just start moving dirt.
Eminent domain, the Water Buffalo Hall.
Love it. Eminent domain. else you got? Come on, you guys are just getting started. How are you really gonna screw this up?
Hold a meeting where the people in charge, all the stakeholders and residents, and it's been decided.
Excellent. Come to this meeting, but we've already made the decision. Other ideas?
Hold the meeting at 4 a.m.
Perfect. Hold it when nobody can come.
Hold the meeting, take all the comments, then start construction.
Perfect. Take the comments and don't change a darn thing.
That's it.
Other ideas? How about give them the wrong place or wrong date? You ever done that? Oh, boy. Woo!
Or have a meeting, but no one's there to open the door.
Excellent. How about they show up and nobody's nice?
That happens.
Yeah, it happens sometimes. Any other ideas?
Hold it in a nearby town, not Bedrock.
Hold it in a nearby town outside the city limits. I love it.
Don't serve Qdoba.
Don't serve any food. How about that? No food or drink. What else? So we get the idea, right? We could keep going, have a lot of fun with this. So I want you to take just a second and think about how many times our organizations, myself included personally, have done some of these things, right? And then if you can commit to nothing else after this hour, like one of those things that you know you do sort of repetitively for community engagement, think, I'm going to be the ambassador in our organization to make sure that doesn't happen again. You know, I would add to some of the things that you said that in this day and age, since we're not in Bedrock anymore, not doing anything online could probably be added to that list of things. So, right, your opportunity to engage is at 6:30 at night. You have to sit through a 2-hour meeting to do it, and that's your only opportunity to tell us what you think. So, with that in mind, we'll kind of jump in here to why engage. Probably fairly obvious to the people in this room. Sometimes we do it because we have to. There's an ordinance that says for this type of project, thou shalt engage. Sometimes we do it because it makes good common sense. Sometimes we do it because people in the community have asked for it. Sometimes we do it because we know if they don't, they will ask for it. So there's a lot of different reasons. More and more our organizations are learning that if we do continuous engagement and relationship building, we have a more solid foundation for when things get rocky and when, you know, those dark fluids start bubbling up from the ground, right? Things that we didn't plan on happen no matter how good of planning we do. So business is changing, right? I mean, that's again, not news to you. Lots of things are being done differently. Organizations are being run differently. The organizations that our residents are a part of are being run differently. Co-creation is becoming the common theme. Top-down management doesn't work anymore, is what we're hearing, what we're seeing, what people are believing. So that means they want more input, more voice. They think layers are ineffective, and they think broadening the reach is effective. Government's changing too. Just pulling job titles alone is pretty interesting, right? So I've been in government for about 2 decades and made the switch to banging the table about 14 months ago. So in that 16-year cycle that I've been in, none of these titles existed at the beginning. I would have never even considered this was possible. Now you could say, but I think you started in the police department. And I did. Those titles are fairly simple, and I'll agree with you that they haven't changed altogether that much. But when you start broadening government and looking at it, our jobs, our titles, it's all so very different. So why online? What does that mean, and why does it mean we have to go online? Access and constant communication, right? So why online? To broaden the reach, to get more people involved. What we know is when we go to in-person events, we mostly have people that are polarized on the sides of an issue. Safety comes in numbers when you start filling in the middle, right? So if you can bring more moderate voices to the table, you typically get a better perspective of what the community actually thinks. Online can really serve as a litmus test for the in-person events. So if online you've gotten 500 comments about a project and they're fairly fairly moderate, or maybe they even lean one way toward the other, that's by no means a scientific, quantitative analysis of what your community thinks on something. It's certainly not a vote for it or against it. But then if you hold some in-person sessions and you're hearing something either way different or the same, it helps you decide what to do next in your community engagement strategy. So if it's very similar, then you might think to yourself, we're probably getting a pretty good indication of what's going on. If it's very different, you might think to yourself, people who are showing up have a specific cause, and there's some things underneath this. So we need to have more meetings, we need to get them involved in the solution. It doesn't mean you discount what they say, or that you look at them as, you know, you have a stake in the game, so we're not going to pay attention or give you time. We have this broader community. Not that at all, but it says we need to dig a little bit deeper. And who else do we need to target and bring in for in-person events? Public to public is something that online gives us. The in-person events struggle. You know, we've all developed new tools. IEP2 has the trainings on tools and techniques for in-person events. Probably lead the field in trying to make us better and better in person to get community input. But sometimes you run out of time for that. It's really hard to go deeper and deeper in person because events are already lasting hours and hours, and people just simply won't give that kind of time. But what you can do is use online tools to go a little deeper. Hey, here's what we're hearing. Tell us more about that. Can you add to what we've heard in these meetings? Opportunities to share rich media. We're going to look at a couple examples in a little bit of that. So rich media allows you to make short videos. City of Niagara Falls has done an awesome job putting together 1 minute and 50-second videos on all of their projects. So if nothing else, the community gets this bite-sized chunk to say, I know what's going on. The city of Park City saw that in Utah, loved it, copied it. They're doing it with an iPhone and city staff, zero budget. So the expectation isn't that you have to go out and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars anymore. It's just that you take the little bite-sized chunk and you feed it in a really digestible way to your community members. Global online activity, we said we'd talk about global trends. Probably no secret that bandwidth use across the globe is going up. Probably we're not going to see that take a downward trend. Probably going to keep going up as people get more and more access. This is some data from Bang the Table. So we have about 400 clients across the globe, New Zealand, Australia, United States, Canada. And this data shows, here's the male and female use of our sites, so about half and half gender-wise. Here is the age dynamic. So you can see younger people, you probably can't read it, 18 to 24 is the first column, 25 to 34, 35, 44, and on up by tens. So what we see is that there's a lot of online use for the 25 to 55 to 65. And then it does dip a little bit. Here's what's interesting though, same age brackets for amount of time people spend online engaging, at least for our client base. And what we see is that older folks tend to spend more time on the site. We're going to talk a little bit later about how you choose online tools, and these are good things to keep in mind. Who am I getting with a tool that's going to take a little more time, and who am I likely to access or target with a really quick input tool? There might be some age demographic analysis to apply there. Other things that we see working really well for young people, a lot of our clients think, wow, you know, I'm going to use online tools so young people will just magically show up. Well, they don't, right? I mean, you still have to market, you still have to communicate, you still have to invite them into the space. One of the ways to do that is to gamify things a little bit, right? It's also to offer some incentives. Have a contest. You know, do some creative things where you allow the different age demographics to communicate with you the way they're used to communicating with each other. Someone mentioned yesterday at a meeting we had a Snapchat. We tried it and it didn't work. As we sort of unpack that together, it turns out they may not have marketed it to the right demographic or explained to them the benefit of participating by uploading images. So sometimes when you try new tools and you think, oh, it didn't work for the demographic that we thought, you have to do a little bit more analysis to figure out why. look for in online tools, here's what is happening, and probably privacy protection should be moved up to the top at this point, right? There's a lot of attention in that. So you want to be sure when you choose tools that you're looking at the future for what's going to be required as you move forward. The EU is setting out standards right now that will lead the globe for privacy. Currently, Canadian standards lead the globe for privacy. They're the most stringent. Soon the EU is going to bounce over that. They're working on some standards, probably to be released, I think, by the end of the month, that will be even more stringent. Start looking at that. There's no doubt that the United States will follow, particularly given what we've experienced in the last few months. You want to make sure your data is stored in the United States. It may be a requirement at some point. The WCAG 2.0 certification means that a reader can be plugged in, and those with visual impairments can be able to access your content. You want to look for that certification when you're using online tools. You want to make any sort of accessibility easier for your community. Language accessibility is another item. Some folks are using Google Translate knowing it's not perfect, but if you're in a big metropolitan area like you all are, you don't have the luxury of choosing 2 to 3 languages, right? You need to be accessible to all types of people who are likely to live in your community. Some of our communities in Texas, they say, wow, it really is mostly English and Spanish. They may look at doing duplicate sites, duplicate projects, rewriting content, and really reaching people with good translation. If you don't have the ability to do that because you're so big and you have such a luxury of having people of all kinds of diverse backgrounds, sometimes you have to make decisions that will just make things as accessible as possible given the resources that you have. Google Translate is one. Lots of individuals have also moved toward using their own browser tools, but as an organization you have to make a decision about how you want to handle that. Mobile compatibility is almost a no-brainer at this point. Most folks are working out of their pocket, not at their desk when they're giving you online input. So keep that in mind when you're testing out tools. Give it the mobile try, not just the desktop try. Make sure if you're watching demos, you're pulling out your phones and you're working on that, because that's probably what your community is going to experience. All of these great tools can go on. You can put great content as far as good question asking and great engagement, but if you don't talk about what people want to talk about, they're not going to answer your questions. The city of Fort Collins, I think, is a fantastic example in this. They came on board and started using our platform. They did no marketing on purpose. They really wanted to just experiment a little bit and get their feet wet as an organization as they built out internal structure and policy. I worked for the city of Fort Collins for about 3 years, so I'm real familiar with their culture and I understood that. They had a broadband project get approved by their voters in November of last year. They put one link on one website page in December, and they thought, we'll get a few people to come, we'll see how they like this mapping tool, we'll see what their input is. Over the weekend, they got over 800 pin drops on that project. It spread like wildfire through social media outlets from one community member to the other. It looked like the city was interested, they had heard them, they were talking about what they wanted to talk about. Very quickly, we called Fort Collins, we said, turn your registration on. So they did, and they were able to collect all the information and build out the participant database on their new online tools, really utilizing that project that people were interested in. Was the engagement meaningful for immediate decision making? Of course not. They just passed a vote in November. What could you possibly be asking in December that would result in immediate action, right? But they were just saying, hey, we're building the container. We're going to be in this for the long haul. This is a 5-year project. Let's be realistic. But let's keep the dialogue going. Let's stay open. When you create the online space, it really does work well if you try to think of it as creating an open house. Some of the things you mentioned for the Flintstones were being nice, being welcoming, making sure people had the information, kind of like setting the table, right? When you have people over for dinner, you probably don't serve just one food item. I would say if you're creating an engagement space, don't use just one tool. If you try to engage me with a map, you have lost me. I don't think spatially. I can't really add that well, to be honest. I'm great with words and people, right? So you really want to give people quantitative and qualitative tools to communicate with you. Sometimes spatial makes a lot of sense, and that's one of your commandments that we'll talk about in a little bit. But sometimes spatial doesn't work for what you're asking about. You might want to get pins dropped on a map that give you ideas about geography in an early stage, but then when you've created your themes, you might want to dive deeper into the qualitative stuff to get good data. So use an array of tools, set the space so that no matter who shows up, they'll be comfortable when they get there. This is a spectrum of the tools that Bang the Table hosts, and a lot of these tools are applied by many different providers. Really the important thing here that I want to talk about is this spectrum goes from open to closed tools. Closed means that you're engaging with one individual from the community at a time, and the community's not interacting with one another. They can't see what that individual is saying to you. When that happens, what do you think that individual is assuming about what other people are thinking on this topic? Typically, they're assuming everybody must think just like me, right? So if you can do a survey or a poll, something closed, and also something open, so that the community can start to see what's happening, you remove that curtain that sometimes causes distrust. So again, multitude of tools for multiple different reasons. So why and who we've talked about a good bit as far as tool selection. Context matters too. One of the things that didn't come out with the Flintstone scenario is asking questions that you already know the answers to. We did talk about asking questions when you've already made the decision. Use the context of the project. Use where you are in the process, and don't ask questions if you don't intend to do anything with the data, right? Or if you do, make sure it's clear in your messaging. We're asking this to create conversation with you. There isn't a pending decision coming. An example is some organizations will put up a tool that just says, hey, tell us what's working well and what's not working well. You know, it's kind of an ongoing dialogue. Discussion forums are really good for those opposing views that we talked about. And if you're concerned about risks for online engagement, have some thought about which tools are going to lower your risk. The first thing when we do exercises that says, what are the barriers to online engagement? What keeps you up at night when you're trying to do it? Almost 90% of people go, trolling. Here's the deal. It's really hard to troll a map. It's really hard to try and troll an ideas board online where you have to register and your username shows up. Even if you're anonymous, and so your username might be Mountain Mama, Mountain Mama's going to show up every time, right? So really thinking about how do I create this space that it may not be troll proof, but there's some moderation ability, there's some ability to be able to interact and stop it before it gets widespread. Remember that online engagement is not a vote. And be sure when you're setting up your projects, you're creating that space, you use language that doesn't suggest the majority here wins, right? It's not about that. It's about a space to share and create ideas and join in solution. It's not cast your vote and whoever gets the most gets to go, or whoever gets the most gets their project in. Sometimes the community may come with that perception, especially if you have a voting mechanism or a poll open. So just be really clear in the introduction of that poll. Your opinion is really important to us, but this is not the factor that's going to make the decision. Most of us live and work in a place that is representative, right? So the public's not making the decision. The public's giving input to the representatives who are going to make the decision. So really all you're promising with your online engagement input is I will do my very best to package this in a way so that my decision makers can make the best decision given the input that you've provided. That's really our promise to the public, right? Most of the time. So you just want to be sure you set it up that way. This is Dave Biggs. He did some research and came up with the idea that it takes 7 seconds in the online environment to either gain attention or lose attention. So what do you do in that 7 seconds? Pictures. What do you do pictures of? I'd say anytime you can do pictures of people, it's better than doing pictures without people. There are a few examples that we could look at that would show really good branding, but when the online space is sterile of humanity, it feels sterile of humanity. So try to put people on there. Try to take pictures at your events. Try to take pictures out in your community. Make it feel like it's somewhere people have been before. The role of social media. So social media, I would say best practice is to use as communications and marketing. We looked at some of those new titles that are coming into the United States, and I'm super excited to see community engagement specialists, engagement strategists, engagements evolving as a profession in the United States rapidly. That doesn't mean your communications and marketing people get to lay back and put their feet up. It's not, right? Communications and marketing are the way anybody knows how to engage, where to go, and what to do. So it's a partnership. Social media are tools to push information out to your public and to drive them to a place that you can measure their input. You have to make the online space different from a newspaper ranting blog, right? There has to be some social responsibility attached with registration. There has to be posing of positive, solution-oriented questions versus here's the article, tell us what you think, right? So you really want to be strategic in how you use social media. I have heard that Nextdoor is really growing in use for residents around the Tampa Bay area. Super exciting. When I found Nextdoor as a neighborhood liaison in the city of Fort Collins, I felt like at last, you know, there is a way to talk with residents en masse. What I quickly learned though is that while I could send information out to them, they were having a conversation then amongst themselves that I wasn't a part of. A lot of times what happened was here's the information, and then it was mixed and twisted into whatever contextual format they wanted. My stream didn't get continued. It was an independent place for residents, as it was intended to be, as it was created to be by Nextdoor. What you want to do in those locations is as quickly as possible, remind them that they can fact check with you in a place where you're communicating. If you hear it out in the community, check it. Come on back and check it. Let's have a factual-based discussion. Why do you need a crowd? Why is marketing so important? We talked about those extreme views. You know, at the Flintstone scenario, you're getting the pro-bypath and the anti-bypath, right? In the communities in which I've worked with rapid population growth happening along the Front Range in Colorado, you're pro-growth or anti-growth, which makes no sense, right? You can't really be one of those things or the other thing. Makes no sense. So what you want to be able to do is moderate those opposing views and give people an opportunity to be multifaceted. One of the things that I really started to see impeding in-person engagement was that people felt a responsibility to their friends and family and connections and other organizations that they're a part of, that if they stood up and made a statement that was in opposition to the other person's views, it was going to somehow ostracize them from other social groups. That's super sad, and that's a bad place to be as a community, right? So give them opportunities where they can voice opinions, but they don't have to grab one group or the other. The way you do that is you invite more people to the table. Be sure that you're measuring everything you do online. You want to be sure that you're not just working like Google Analytics, although I'll tell you anytime you should definitely add Google Analytics. It's definitely a first step. But you want to be able to set up a system where you can measure both qualitative and quantitative input. You want to be able to create goals that correlate with what your intention is for a specific set of tools and a specific project. Aware, informed, and engaged are the terms that we use to talk about measurement. Aware is your baseline number. It means this is how people came to the site. This is your Google Analytics numbers, right? How many people got there? What factor leads to aware numbers? Marketing communications, right? If people don't know about it, they can't go. So how are our resources working to drive aware numbers, get people to the site? Informed is how many people learned about the project. Be sure you can manage who downloaded a document, who clicked on a video, who looked at pictures, who looked at a timeline. What did they do to gain information about the project? A lot of times your goals are a really high informed number, and honestly it may not matter that much how many people actually engage. A lot of times people engage because they think things may be going in a bad direction. If people think things are going in a good direction, it's really not worth their time to tell you. I mean, how many times do people call and say, hey, good work? It happens, but it's rare. It's not the masses. So making sure that people know about a project and haven't taken the time to engage with you to tell you they think it's a bad idea or they're concerned can be a really important number. We think about 40 to 50% is a pretty good goal for informed from your aware numbers. We think somewhere in the 10 to 25% range, depending on the level of engagement in your community, is a pretty good engaged number. I worked for the city of Boulder for a number of years. They just had an event called What's Up Boulder. It was a really big open house. They had 650 people there last Monday night. That's rare, right? That's pretty rare. But when I talk to Boulder, we're on the higher end of these percentages because we know they're a super engaged community, right? When we talk to other organizations, other communities, we start at the lower end. So you have to do some norm setting for where are you right now as far as connectedness to your community, and then you set long-term goals for how you're going to raise that. Lots of participation always feels good, but it really is the informed people know what's happening that you're really wanting to focus on initially. It also depends where you are in the project. Let's face it, when something's new and it's exciting and it's blue sky thinking, people really don't have to know a whole lot to kind of weigh in, right? You're picking tools that are pretty simple. Hey, I think we should have a parkway through there, or I think we should put a new park in, or open space, or let's not forget about the trees, right? But when you start narrowing down to solutions and you're asking for more time to invest, to be knowledgeable about the topic and give input, you typically see those numbers go down. Unless you set up more of a ballot situation and you want to know really quick, scenario 1, 2, or 3 is your preference. So think about that as you're setting your KPIs for your projects. Recommendation is that you look to a consistent place to send the public. If you're creating a new URL for every single project, that's a lot. It's a lot to track internally. It's an awful lot to ask your community to track. You can always send them to one space and then divert from that space as necessary to meet your internal needs. We're going to talk a little bit about the 10 Commandments. And I have to say that these commandments were supposed to be on scroll paper for you. Jeremy spent hours last night. The scroll paper, it peeled off around the edges, so it made this really cool border. The printer did not like those edges. Paper jam. So we'll just look at the nice scroll and think about these commandments. Give me just a second. I want to be able to show you some examples here, so we'll go to this view. So the first one is, thou shalt not use planning jargon in the online space. So I know I'm the non-planner in the room with all planners. I have to tell you all that I think you have the most challenging jobs in local government. You are technically trained, and then you are asked to go out to the community and speak simply and leave all the technical information behind unless people are capable and interested in taking a deeper dive. So basically, you have to pull from skills and assets on both ends of a spectrum to deliver your product to the community effectively. It's tough. That's hard to do. The technical terms that you look at all day long in making decisions about whether or not a project is suitable and appropriate, most of us don't understand. We really don't. So team up with folks in your organization. I like to say I'm from Alabama, so I can dumb it down pretty good. Like, run it by somebody like me, right? Have us look at it and say, I'm not sure I know what this term is. How can we break it down? The second one is, thou shalt provide, it's really hard to read this thing, isn't it? I hope you can read from yours better. Yeah, I'm gonna grab a paper. I've not memorized the 10 Commandments since Sunday school. Thou shalt provide options for visual feedback, images, and videos. What does this mean, Amanda? It's kind of a weird way to say it. I'm going to show you an example from Boulder. This is their homepage of their brand new engagement site. They're a few months in. Here is their transportation plan. We're pretty excited about this. Jeremy's definitely geeking out on it. I like that they have the resources here for people. They can take the level of dive that they want into the project. They can watch videos. They can look at documents. They have a mapping tool open. But for commandment number 2, I want you to take a look at stories. So what they said, and it takes the pictures just a little bit, it looks like here. So what the organization said is, hey, we're doing our TMP. What do you like about walking? What's working well with walking? Where are the challenges in walking? They asked people to drop a pin in a map, and we'll take a look at that in just a second. But they also said, share your images, share your photos. Let's build a community photo gallery about walking. What are your stories? And people did it, right? Like, they started sharing paragraphs about this treasure to get to walk in their community. If you guys did that, I just sent you a picture of me sitting in that Jeep saying traffic isn't that bad. Maybe you don't want to cut your head off in the picture. But you start to get an idea about using images to share. More and more people are using videos to share as well. Just ask people to talk at their next neighborhood gathering about whatever the topic is. Make it a contest. Give them a prize for whoever does the best, most creative video. Everything has to be 30 seconds or less. I bet you would get some pretty interesting submissions. Some of them you might not want to post online, right? But typically, I'll tell you that of our 400 clients, we are removing less than 2% of comments globally. So what we're learning is that people actually behave pretty well in the online space. One of the things you can do online that you can't do in person is you can say, here are the rules, and if you don't participate, we can't show your comment. We'll communicate with you. We'll ask you to please post again in a more appropriate manner. But we can't allow you to post if you don't follow these rules. How many of you have ever been the rule enforcer at an in-public event? I'll raise like every appendage. I've done it a lot. It is tough, isn't it? Because if you try to correct a member of the community about their behavior, 99% of the time you're shaking your head. You're like, don't do it. 99% of the time, it comes right back here, doesn't it? And you're like, I should have come in here with football pads. It is tough. So sometimes the rules are a little bit easier there. Thou shalt capture the past, lest it halt your project and the project after that. We looked at the stories tool there with Boulder. The city of Austin did some really interesting stuff when they were doing some development in their downtown core on their parks. These parks have been in existence since before Texas was a state, right? Because it was all open space then. But if you ask the community, they've been around since the beginning of time. So the history is so thick and rich and exciting for those parks. They're going to go under some changes for the density that's happening. Not go away, but they're going to look a little bit different. There's no way they could have initiated that without first capturing the essence of the value of the space from the community. If you go forward with a project of change and you don't do that, you're going to have people attack your process. Why are they going to attack your process? Was your process really bad? Maybe, but more likely than not, attacking the process is the way to stop the project. It's a lot easier to attack public process than it is a specific public project. And capturing the past can help you get over that hurdle. There's nothing more painful than going forward and all of a sudden having it halt, right? and the amount of cost for that can be exorbitant. We've talked about number 4, use a variety of tools, choose them for solid, defensible reasons. Sometimes we find a new toy and, you know, it's like the old, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, sometimes you have a screw. And you can use the hammer and you can get the engagement done, but it's probably not going to function in the way that you wanted it to. So just take the time and find the right tool. Thou shalt use mapping tools for spatial projects and spatial projects alone. Give me just a second while I pull this up. So as planners, I'm going to assume that you guys like mapped.
Yeah.
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 We like maps. We talked about how some people like me don't actually get the map. However, there are times when it makes great sense to use a map. City of Boulder's getting information based on geography here. It works great. You can go down all the way to the individual comment to see what people are thinking based on place. If you're asking more qualitative questions though, using the map is confusing for people. So be sure you use it for spatial sake and spatial sake alone. And that will create a better understanding of the community's use of the tool. Thou shalt phase the project in meaningful ways and honor the phases before it. You guys, sometimes you work on projects that last longer than your lifetime, right? And that is tough to follow. It's tough for you, it's really tough for the community. I love what City of Parker's done here. So you can see the timeline for the project and the photos. It's really easy to get a visual. Oh, this is where we're at. Okay, I can see. I'm going to weigh in on these different things at this different time. That's good for me. I can understand that. They've also done a project timeline down the side here. This is a fairly quick project, honestly. It's a Main Street redevelopment. They're not creating an airport or, you know, putting in a new interstate, which can take many, many more years. They're not doing a complete master plan, which you might be planning for 20 to 40 years down the road. But you can see by this example, they're using language that's fairly easy for the community to understand. They're showing you where you're at and where you're going. This is a new project, so they can't really show you where they've been, but you can see how they've set themselves up to do that effectively. Thou shalt work in bite-sized chunks. Master plans are how long? 152-page documents, PDF, non-searchable. Nobody's looking at that, right? You wouldn't if you didn't have to. It is brutal. Really pulling out those bite-sized chunks are going to make it so much easier for the community to engage. I'm going to pull up the City of Gilroy. It's worth it to show you what they've done. They are the garlic capital of the world. Yeah. Check out their city logo. This didn't come up. I must have mistyped. Let's try it one more time here. Let's go here. Oh, maybe I can't type. This is a test. There we are. This is the best city logo I think I've ever seen. Is that not great? The garlic in there. When they used to have their actual city logo at the top. Let's see. I bet it's here on their city website. Is that not great? In the G. I love it. I think it is so cool. So the City of Gilroy just started their neighborhood traffic management program. And the project manager called me and she's like, Amanda, it's 62 pages long. I said, do not put it up as a PDF. I mean, you have to, right? When I say don't, I mean don't only. There are community members that want to read every page. You're not reaching the masses with that document, however. But the neighborhood leaders who've been involved in creating it, absolutely. If you didn't post it, they might think that you're hiding it from them. So when I say that, I mean don't do it alone. You still have to post it. But what she did was she found the 3 key areas undergoing the most change that she thought people would want to have the most input about, and that she thought would affect council's ability to adopt the program. She set up those 3 areas with their own ability to get engagement. I absolutely love it. She's just posted it last Friday, so it's pretty new. But you can see it's fairly easy, and here's the comments. So people don't have to look at the document. She gave them enough information here that they could look at it really for about 5 minutes and give fairly meaningful input back to her on those key aspects. Thou shalt collect demographic data along with project feedback. There's nothing worse than putting a comment down, council member X sees it and says, wow, this is really insightful. I'd like to meet with this community member. Who said this? Your guess is as good as mine, ma'am or sir. I don't know. You want to be sure that when you create a system for online input, that you're able to communicate back to the individual that gave it. One of the assets of online engagement we said was deeper conversation and more deeper input. So as you go deeper, you may need to go back and forth multiple times to really capture the essence of the person's comment. The city of Boulder, when they created their registration page, really struggled with how much information to ask for. They wanted to be able to slice and dice their data later based on who came and who participated online. They have some key target populations that they want to involve in their decision making. It's a college community, so they want to be sure they're hearing the college voice. Certainly long-term residents are important, but what we often see is that homeowners may come to meetings more often than renters. In a community that's 50-50 home ownership and rentals, that's a pretty skewed input piece. So that kind of data was important to them as they created their registration page. Some of it they felt like was going to be invasive, so they made it optional. It's also it's an option to make it optional, right? You can't, however, slice and dice data that you don't have. So those are things you have to weigh out as an organization. What are the most important pieces? And then what would be nice to know but might also be a barrier to participation? And could we, in fact, make that optional to allow more? Thou shalt use social media wisely. We've talked about that enough that I won't hit it again for you. But I do just want to say that you want to continue to remember that if you can't measure it and you can't easily put it into a report, then it might be a marketing and communications tool instead of an engagement tool. And think about how to do that. Sometimes we see, even in the engagement space, people put up social media links that have no relevance on the project. Sometimes that can be like noise and confuse people. So just keep in mind, if it's there, it should have a reason for being there. All right, I want to show you the city of Casey, a city in Australia, one of my favorite engagement sites. The city does amazing work. What they do most effectively, in my opinion, is they close the feedback loop. Thou shalt always close the feedback loop. If you don't, the engagement did not occur, right? And it may have made things worse for your relationship with your community instead of better. Because what did you do? You wasted their time. That's what they think. And what's more valuable to people than anything else these days is their time. So if you take their time, you've got to tell them what you did with it. You want to come up with tools that allow as much automatic closure of the feedback loop as you go along as possible. So if you can get some automations to say thank you, to say here's what we're doing with your input, to say, hey, while you're here, look at this other project and give us your input there too, then you're going to save yourself some steps. I used to think it was so hard to come in from an in-person event, You got these 200 pieces of input. You've now got to type up. You've got to find all their emails. You've got to enter their email. How many times do people write their email so that you can legibly read it? Never, never. So trying to close that feedback loop can be really challenging. Think about that on the front end and make it as easy for yourself as possible. Even if you have people type their emails, it will help you because the mistake is then theirs and not yours, and they're less likely to make it than you are. People tend to now type better than they can write. So give that some thought. I want to show you from the city of Casey, and I know we're running out of time, we're almost done. I want to show you what they did for their comprehensive plan report. Their comprehensive plan is called Casey Next, and it's a concluded conversation. Oops, wrong search bar. They used a product called Sway. Has anybody ever used Sway? It's free office product. So it doesn't even cost any money. I'm just now learning how to use it myself. I discovered it from Casey. It's a great alternative to a PDF. So what they did in their report was they pulled graphs, they pulled information from their online engagement space, and they just fed it back out in a report format. I love it. So this is what it looks like. You get to load images at the beginning. Let's see if I can figure out how to scroll down on the machine. Oh, there we go. So the video plays right in there. You can see as you go, more and more information shows up. Isn't that better than a PDF?
Yeah.
Look how thorough this is. They collected the whole community engagement strategy in this one document. Obviously, it's a comp plan. We all know it took 2 years minimum, right? We all know it did. And it's all right here in one document. They had to write hardly anything new for this document at the end of the comp planning process because they had captured it as they went, and all they had to do was just pull it in to the one place. They were able to take this same document and do the tour to bring people all up to speed about the comp plan after. They get the Rotary clubs, they get the nonprofits, neighborhood leaders were able to take this in a box and share it. So super easy just to pull back in, and it really, really landed well with their community as opposed to watching or reading the 52-page document. So I hope the 10 Commandments are useful. Feel free to cut them out and paste them on a scroll.
Etch them in stone.
That's right, etch them in stone. But I'm all done. I appreciate your time. I hope you got some nuggets that'll be useful for you in online engagement, and I'll turn things over.
All right, and before I say anything else, can everyone give a big round of applause to Lynn for setting this event up? So yeah, I'm going to be loading up a couple of screens of our back end of Engagement HQ. You've seen a little bit of our front end, but if anyone needs to go, we have hit the hour, so if you got to go while I load up my screens, it's a perfect kind of transition time and it won't be awkward. So if you are interested in staying and seeing a little bit about our platform, it will take 15, 20 minutes or so, including questions from the crowd, both for myself and Amanda. So I'm going to load that up real quick. So hang tight. And for those of you who do have to go, thank you for coming by.
And if you want seconds, please come get it.
Yes.
It'll make me feel a lot better about eating now if somebody else is eating. Yeah.
Bring some chips. Like whole chips. Bring the whole bag. Bring everybody crunch. I can't do that. When everybody's old.
Okay, so
A lot of stuff go through. I'm dying planners.
That's why I want
To get on board. For a while.
Let's do this.
Say what?
Hello, I'm Hannah.
Hannah, hi Hannah.
Hi, nice to meet you.
You know John Menendez?
With handles. I was in
And now you're back?
yeah, that was my best when we decided
Afraid to say for sure because I'm not.
we started the food. I didn't even know the food was free.
This is so different than, maybe 2 years ago, I went to, maybe it was a webinar. Different medias that the city and the city use.
They try to, well,
Zoomed out.
they're supposedly part of the table potentially, see if really fits well.
This was different.
A train to go from Greeley down 85 to Denver.
Gizmos.
It's almost surprising how many people must know what they
I think you're trying to figure out what you're really doing.
But part of the issue is that I-25.
Fire. That's not, you got it. Some has really good grasp of the whole thing. What thing? I don't like that name.
Hello, Jeremy.
Yeah, we are just about all set. Yeah, feel free.
Oh, for Zephyr Hills? Oh, okay. You don't know Tammy and Veronica? Yeah, me too.
You get your passing around planning commission.
I knew that. Tanya. Oh, was it USF?
There's a BRT lane, you
Oh,
know.
you're in the class?
Yeah, private, non-US.
Outside of.
Yeah.
So you're standing next to her in the parking lot? Let's see, you didn't up the street. That's why I don't remember you as well. Well, anyway.
Definitely.
So, well, that's not true.
Yeah. It goes right along. Pelican, the backside of it.
Yeah. The sun was out, I remember that. The water nearby, palm trees.
All about engagement.
I'm getting my food list.
So you're doing one at work?
I have a
For
friend.
where? I think you mentioned it to me, yeah. So
Works at CU? Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not.
Okay, so where are the locations?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we've chatted.
Oh, really?
I was living in Hyde Park last year, and
They built some new stadiums.
the commute was really nice.
But it really doesn't change the face of improving.
They didn't, it was fast. So I bought a house in River Rouge.
My son's
Exactly, that's what he wanted to have, you know, and whatnot for the people.
Okay, it was kind of like,
just further south of Florida.
All the midst of the
Other than-
All right, I'm gonna get started. It'll be really quick and casual, and if anyone, you know, wants me to dive deeper into something, feel free to just give me a shout or ask any questions. And you know, I want to also, you know, piggyback off a lot of what Amanda said during her presentation, because she did cover a lot of best practices for community engagement. But I am gonna, you know, I'm gonna breeze through a lot of the front end of the platform, because you did see it during her presentation. But a little bit about Bang the Table as a company. We were founded in 2007 out of Australia. Our two co-founders are both planners who were unsatisfied with the handful of people that would come to their public meetings, and you know, the angry mob mentality that would dominate decision making. And like Boulder, a lot of NIMBYs. I can use that word here, I think. But you know, in 2007, the cloud and software as a service and things like that were new phenomena. And if you did anything online, you were seen as, you know, forward thinking. But now over the last 10 years, we've tweaked and iterated and you know, built upon our Engagement HQ platform. And in Australia, we're working with, what is it, Amanda, a third or a half of all local governments there?
A little over a third.
A little over a third. So yeah, it's a big number there, and you know, what they do is they use it as the ongoing citywide resource, right? They build it as an asset that they can use over the long term, just like Boulder. And that's one of the things that, you know, if you guys in the audience are working for a local government, for a city or for the county, you know, I challenge you to think about Engagement HQ as a way to have it as the asset over the long term, and not necessarily maybe for one project or the other. But we also do work a lot with the private sector, and I did pull up a comprehensive planning project run through a consultant. So the platform, you know, the lines of code remain the same. You can use it for a project. You could also use it on an annual basis. But you know, Boulder is engaging on these this wide variety of topics, everything from transportation to budget to this is actually kind of hippy dippy, but I really like showing it. It's listening and collaborating. How do we listen to each other? And I wanted to show the discussion forum real quick because it is you know, one of the more interactive tools and one of the riskier ones. Surveys on the other end, everyone knows what a survey is. But on the discussion forums, you can have a two-way conversation with your stakeholders, with your community, and they can have conversations with each other. So Boulder Talks has been very active right here on the site, replying to comments, and actually, you know, getting the conversation to do a deeper dive. So this person right here wrote a 2-line comment. They wanted to piggyback off of that, and sure enough, they get a very big paragraph in response. So this is where you need the qualitative feedback and you know, the deeper conversations. You can also upvote and downvote. And one of the things that we do as a company is we moderate all these forums in English and Spanish for things like trolling, bullying, harassment, spam, the easy things that you can violate, or you can tell that someone's violating. Our software talks to an app on our moderators' phones around the world, so that's taken care of all in-house. And so, you know, when you have these project pages that are collecting all these responses, Amanda did touch upon the need to collect demographic data. know who you're reaching, and know you're reaching an accurate cross-section of the community. So on the sign-up form, Amanda did show this, where you have the additional demographic questions that they're asking. But then in the back end, what that does for you is it creates the database of participants. And this is where you can slice and dice your audience. So you can sort by sign-up form answers. This is the, sort by the gender demographic question. As you can see, it kind of changes automatically. And then we will sort by the participant tag. You can create individual tags for participants, like they came to the December meeting, or they're an engineer, they're interested in economic development, things like that, any arbitrary way that you want to sort them. And as you can see, when you create those tags, the 100 or so dummy people that we kind of fake registered on a demo site, it narrows all the way down to one. So we've got Alex, and what can you do with this boring collection of rectangles and checkboxes? You can create a group. So there's an error because I already created Alex. That was to be expected. And then you can do a couple things with it. You can send them custom email newsletters. So one of the things that we also stress is we want to not be one additional thing that occupies your time and you know, one other thing that you have to deal with that's a bother. We want to integrate with the things that you're already doing. So we integrate with email, we integrate with social media, and we have our engagement tools built so they can integrate with face-to-face meetings and in-person engagement. So for the people that don't have a computer, if you get to them in a public meeting, you can bring the iPad there, have them engage online, but still have things able to be transcribed into the platform. But the way that we integrate with email is when you create a custom newsletter on here. This is fairly straightforward, but let's select a nice custom banner so that you can you know, make it your own brand identity and make it uniquely you. Also custom HTML in here, so if you don't like how we do it, you can do it your own way. And then when you go and send out your newsletter, you select who's going to receive your email. And this is really useful if you're in a big organization and you want to reach one neighborhood or one community, one zip code. You can find a group that you created and reach out to just those people. So there's Alex, the group that I created. And you know, when I was with the Planning Commission back in 2013 as an intern, one of my first tasks was to manually update every single leadership contact of the HOA, each HOA leader, you know, confirm their information for Imagine 2040. And you know, it was just a massive spreadsheet, and I had to go through each one. But if they're in the platform, you can sort people by homeowners association membership or leadership, or if they're in a civic or social organization, things like that. So this is a time saver right here. And you can also re-engage people who engaged on certain projects. So what's a good one? Yeah, my first consultation, you can send an email to everyone who participated on there. So this is what Amanda was saying about closing the feedback loop. Yes?
If we already have an extensive database and stuff, how well does that port over or import into your system?
You can import CSVs into the database right here. So if you have their usernames and passwords already, or if you want to just give them like 1, 2, 3, 4, that's fine. You also, most people I think come in, correct me if I'm wrong, Amanda, but they usually invite people to the platform, and you just upload a CSV with all their names and email addresses, reach out to them, and so you know, you don't have to start from completely scratch when you're onto the And it's also, if you're using it for one project, you can also export it so that you have it, you know, if you're not using Engagement HQ anymore. And then another thing that you can do with the grouping and sorting of the audiences is limit participation of projects to just that group. So as you can see, this is where you create a project page. Everything you've seen so far with the front end functionality does not require any code or any technical know-how. It's really intuitive, just click, click, click. What I was going to show you here is on the visibility tab, you can choose exactly who can view this project. So if you're like Boulder and you're creating a citywide resource for everybody to participate, but you don't want to remove people from the Engagement HQ platform or send them somewhere else, if you want to if they want to engage just me, I would feel very special if they did, because my opinions are important and I'm very smart. But they could create a project page just like this tile and use the segmentation tool right here to make it just visible to me. We're working with the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation up in Canada, and they use this 100% of the time because they're looking to engage the healthcare practitioners, connect them with patients. And that's very sensitive information. That's HIPAA, I think, is the law, right? Where you can't share any sensitive information. And they want to make sure nobody else can access comments. So you make this protected, nobody else can see it but the practitioner and the patient. But for planning, if you're doing a community visioning thing, you want everybody to see it, so you just make it visible to everybody.
And if you start off with everybody, because you want to get input from everybody, but then later on, you're done getting the input, and you just want a select group to be working more intensely, can you then pare it down to where, instead of everybody, then switch it down to a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
The community panel ability is the place you can do that. The city of Golden has Guiding Golden as their site, and they actually allow their city council that level of participation. So they share minutes. Basically, they were trying to shorten their city council meetings, right? And so they said one way we could do that is by finding some other resource to share our outside meetings. So they'd go to these working groups, you know, individual council members as representative of the body. So they have a duty to report back to the body and to the community. They can't break sunshine laws. They have to do everything open. So they started just posting notes from the meetings on a community panel level project. Can you pull up guidinggolden.com, Jeremy? And then they shorten their meetings and they don't have to do that anymore. Really creative. When they first called me and said, hey, we want to do this and give all of our city council members administrative rights, I almost cried, because who would have had to have trained them, right?
Yeah.
Me. So this
one, right?
This is a great, this Council Connects page was a great sort of in the between community panel. Be the same for a working group. Yeah.
And then, of course, all this, since a lot of us are government, is stored and stuff, so like if there's ever a public
Exactly.
records request, you can pull up all the comments and everything.
Yeah, exactly. I actually think every single meeting I've had in the Tampa Bay area brought up public records laws, because I know the laws are really strong here. And, you know, this is a living, breathing site that changes and evolves over time. So Golden could archive this and put up something else in its place. But everything lives in the back end, and you can pull it up at any time.
Even if we purchase a project and not, or we purchase for a year or two or something, do we have access to the data forever, or you download at the end of a term, or what happens?
Amanda, what do you think would be the best answer to that?
Yeah, so you download all your data whenever you want. You own your data. So you can collect it, store it wherever you'd like. As long as you have the URL active, you'd be able to go to your archive projects. Once you discontinue your relationship with us, the data is still yours. You would just then house it on your own site. The city of Austin's just going through that transition. They're staying with us as a client, but they're merging sites. So they have multiple sites with us. I'm sorry, downtown Austin. not the city. They're merging their sites, so they're actively downloading the data to one, re-uploading it onto the new site so they can store it. So pretty interesting. They're doing some interesting, really exploratory work that we haven't seen before, where their chamber's kind of selling different access to hubs on the system so that they can come in and purchase the data they're providing. It's quite interesting. It'll be great when it's live and we can share it.
And yeah, I know I might be jumping around a little bit, but Golden is also a really good example of, they're doing it a little bit differently, making it a citywide resource. They're blending the really fun and the really simple, like bite-sized chunks like Amanda was mentioning, with the really, dry or serious topics like, investment forums, short-term rentals, affordable housing. So those big picture issues, but at the very top, they get people warmed up with a quick poll. And they are asking this week, what is your favorite flower? Presumably because they plant flowers on their main street and they want to know what flowers to plant. I think a couple weeks ago was what movie you want to see in the park for the Movies in the Park series. And what won? What won that?
Wrinkle in Time. Their project manager called and she said, this was a big learning for me, Amanda, because I don't like Wrinkle in Time and I shouldn't have made it an option.
Yeah.
I said, don't give the community options that you can't handle.
Yeah.
Growing mistake.
And so for engaging on a multilingual basis, this is what a planning consultant does for Portchester, New York on a comprehensive plan. They are duplicating the projects, but both in English and Spanish. So it's the exact identical type of engagement. But when you go into here, it's all native translation, and you can engage in Spanish and in English. And then I think the last bit that I'm going to cover is how to measure and how to report and how to analyze what you get. We want to make you able to pull reports at any time, even if you do one project and you have to go back through public records requests and pull it. You can pull reports from any projects that have been published at any time frame. So you can get high-level data on your engagement from forever, the last few days, or any custom period of time. And then when you download it, it can go to PDF, Excel. You can get overview of multiple projects. Pardon me while I get this going. But right below here is the community panel where you can download the demographic data of your participants. So we want to give you as much data as you need. Our newest engagement strategist, Megan Rubel, says data is the new bacon. And I like that phrase because it is important, and now that we're doing more quantitative engagement, we do need these sorts of things. We do need as much data as possible if we're collecting it. So high-level overview of who's visiting the site. As you can see, our demo site has peaks in the weekdays and valleys in the weekends. We've got about 3 overachievers per weekend on average. And then visits by channel, so where they're coming from. And if you're using this as an ongoing resource, I would encourage checking this regularly so that you can see where people are coming from. How are your email newsletters performing? How is your social performing? So, we get nothing from social because this is how we access it directly, not from Facebook. So there's 0. But we could see, over the last 6 months, we've had X% of social media outreach. Let's try getting 50% more clicks over the next quarter from social media. This is where you can get that high-level overview. And then, go ahead.
No, I'm just trying. So it's set up that everybody must register. It's not an option that you can't register. You can make as much optional as you want, but everybody has to register.
Yeah, so you can turn on unverified participation, and you can also do polls and surveys and a couple other tools where you can have multiple IP addresses drop comments at once. So what that means is you can have the iPads at the public meetings and collect the info through that. And you have to like have the same person with the tablet just going like that
Right.
with the participant. And then with unverified participation, with that kind of component, what that means is you can just enter gibberish, and that's what Fort Collins was doing when they were starting. They were having people just drop their pins on the map and not need to go back through their email inbox and verify their email. You know, click the unique
Right.
link to go back to the site. So it is seen occasionally as a barrier to participation. I believe it's viewed as a barrier to participation, but I believe we have kept statistics, Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, about whether verified or unverified participation affects engagement level, and we found the differences to be negligible.
Okay, and does your data also, I know some people set up computer programs or whatever to spam an answer to a survey or something, that'll pick that up also?
Yeah, so we track IP addresses, but we don't want to automatically require everyone to have a unique IP, because for something like Hillsborough County, the number one IP address is going to be the library. We're going to get 100 people from the library
Right.
on the library computers. So we don't want to like automatically pull people who are from the same one, but we do want to give you the option if someone's trying to balance stuff or troll or take over the conversation to give you
Have
the
the
option to
option.
remove that.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a park project in Canada where they were turning the park into a parking area, not popular, right? And the project had already been approved, it was happening, the parking deck was being built. They were asking the community to provide some insight on aesthetics, but a group started to organize and try and spam the system, trying to stop the project. So it was a really unique experience for me. I was still shadowing my counterpart in Canada at the time. And so our moderators alerted her, she contacted city staff. We all had a big conference call to say, well, how do you want to handle this situation? Here's what's happening. The city was able to put out specific information for these are the types of comments that will remain. These are the types of comments that we're no longer accepting due to not having any pertinence on the situation at hand or the decisions to be made. These will be removed. So it was really a collective problem-solving opportunity to how to do it and how to do it in a way that really set the tone so that the city would have less and less issues from it. So we can always immediately stop the spam, but then it's more of a partnership for the spam is stopped, now how do we save engagement?
Yeah, exactly. That was a lot of headaches in that project.
Yeah,
Yes.
a lot of learning.
And so yeah, that's pretty much the entire platform. Yeah, this is the Aware, Informed, Engaged that Amanda touched on in the presentation. It is important to cover how people are engaging, not necessarily just what people said in certain comments and what they didn't say. But that's what our platform is. It takes community engagement full circle. So it's not one tool where you're spinning your wheels and completing one task and checking one box of the process, but it's something that can help you achieve organizational goals, something they can use over the long term and have as an asset. Because once people are they're in and they're engaging, they know that this is the one place to participate, and from that you can get all the guts in the back end that help you do your job more effectively. So with that, I will thank you all for your time and appreciate you all coming out and open the floor to questions.
Okay. So I'm assuming then that the way that it works is that your tools will be embedded into like our websites or links from our website to the different tools. You host everything on your back end, and then the moderation where you said that you guys moderate, is that included in the packages or
Yeah, any package, it's included in the moderation, or all the moderation is included in any package. And yeah, it's worldwide, 24/7. And no matter if you're using it for one project or on an ongoing basis, it's all.
Okay, the reason, because if not, having a staff person to moderate
Yeah.
could,
Nightmarish.
yeah.
Jeremy, can you show a couple of front ends of the site? Because we actually are not a tool embed organization. Our sweet spot, maybe something besides Boulder.
Okay.
Well, that's what I was wondering, if
Yeah.
it was an embed, or if it's like you're hosting the site.
You're hosting an entire engagement platform.
Okay,
Yeah.
all
Do you mind showing the homepage?
Oh, like a corporate site or something?
No, just the home landing page of our site. Just hit home.
Where am I?
Just home. Yep. So we have 3 different formats for a home landing page. They're all named after Australian beaches, Torquay, Whitehaven, and Bondi, so you can pretend you're lying on one while you build your site. So they range from being really picture-oriented, can you scroll down just a little bit there so they can see, to being more information on the homepage. Some of the comp planning sites or particular project sites allow widgets to feed through, which is information providing to the public. But our sweet spot is really being an entire engagement platform. And you can either use a subdomain of your organization site, or you can have something completely independent. In the US, so far, we've had mostly completely independent sites, but we're starting to see more and more subdomains. Gilroy has a subdomain, yourvoice.cityofgilroy. Speak Up Austin has its own URL. It's about half and half.
Right, but it would be customizable enough to where it would look like our branding.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Might want to show just a couple more front-end sites. Let's see, Guiding Golden is a great one. If you go to the homepage there.
FDOT has something similar, so for larger projects or Florida Department of Transportation,
Yeah.
they're required to create the project site, so this would be something similar. And there's the tools, I think, for survey, online survey as well.
That's great.
I'm not sure if.
That's great. We'd love to do some.
They're limited, I think, to, can we create a survey through this, or you still have to use Qualtrics or something else?
Oh no, so we have a survey tool.
The survey tool is already built into?
So if we go to your site, all the tools we see, they're your tools that you've developed.
Correct.
So on
Yeah.
a project page, you can mix and match any of these tools. So like Amanda was saying, mixing quantitative with qualitative. When you have to do a survey and then you want to bring them into a forum, you just put them side by side. Or if you're a planner and you like maps, and since I have before, I can say that I like maps and planners are awesome. You can do 8 million maps, right?
Okay, so then the mapping tool, is that your own proprietary mapping tool, or do you use would you use like our Esri if we use our GIS products? How does that work for engagement? Like I've noticed a bicycle, like somebody clicks, bicycle issues or bike lanes stuff, interactive.
So apparently we're working on a integration with Esri, but that's not fully completed yet. However, the way that we integrate with GIS is you can upload WMS layers into the platform, and the way that has worked in the past, I'm going to go to Gatineau. They were doing a bicycle master plan. I don't know why I was going to the French site first instead of the English site. But they uploaded a GIS layer of their bike lanes and had people comment on specific aspects of the bike lanes that they wanted to see, or they wanted to engage with.
Okay, and then all those comments and all those points and stuff, you house in your database that can be downloaded.
Yes, and you have coordinates too.
Oh, okay, so all right.
This is an interesting example of non-verified participation. They got over 2,000 comments. They did it on Bike to Work Day. They just had people out with iPads. Obviously you're not going to verify your email and answer a bunch of demographic questions in your bike pants straddling your bike. It's just not the time and place. But what the system does is it automatically sends an email to the person that participated just by putting in their email, reminds them that there's an opportunity to register later and that there might be other projects they're interested in.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Lynn, you have all their contact information.
I do have their contact information.
I'll give
And
you a
since you
card
guys
as
are the
well.
last ones to stick around, make yourselves a bowl.
That's right. We should have pulled out dessert right now for this instead. Live and learn.
Right as the demo started.
Awesome, thank you. Let me bring some cards back. Oh, awesome. There you go.
So it's just coming like.
Cool, wait, okay, cool. I
Designer
have
those
to
roundabouts,
They do.
consider, let's review those for you.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of experience, pretty small fee compared to the total. We can either validate what you've done or give you
Listen
information.
while I grab some cards here.